In this lecture, what I want to do is trace the importance, or the, if you will, the ramifications of the scientific revolution. It's all well and good to talk about important figures, but it's really helpful to try and lay out how this is starting to reshape how man is viewed and how man views society. And I want to do that through two figures. I'm going to start with this man here, Francis Bacon. Now, Francis Bacon is someone who I could have talked about in the scientific revolution. He's a major figure of that as well. But I think it's helpful to see that he's just as important to science as he is for society, because he transforms the way in which we start to think about knowledge itself. Prior to the scientific revolution, you had two options to thinking about where knowledge came from. One came through revelation, meaning the Bible or the church, and the other was through tradition. Namely, the Greeks, the ancients. What did they know? What could they tell you? But by the time of the scientific revolution, all of these ideas had started to take, if you will, a hit. Think about the voyages of discovery of the New World. Did the ancients talk about the Americas? Where is North America in the Bible? Let alone thinking about the conflicts over religion in terms of the wars of religion, the Reformation, and all the rest of that. All of this means that all of these ideas, or these old ways of thinking about knowledge, were really weakened during this time period. And Francis Bacon comes along and says, no, there's a better way to pursue knowledge. What he champions is a principle known as empiricism. Empiricism is a belief that all knowledge is gained from our sensory experiences, that our senses tell us what knowledge is. If we can observe it, if we can see it, if we can taste it, if we can touch it, that's what tells us what is real and what is. And this fits with so much of the scientific revolution that we've covered so far. How did we know that it was a heliocentric universe rather than a geocentric? Well, through what our senses observed in the sky, Brahe, Galileo, and others. And so what Bacon really champions is a system of making observations and drawing conclusions from them. He's critically important. You can start to hopefully see the connections here. And he's a critical person behind building what we think of as today the modern scientific method. You create hypotheses, you make observations, and from those observations you derive what is true. You make conclusions. But this is a but to broaden it, I mean, this is a groundbreaking way to view knowledge itself. No longer are you trusting in the church or your priest. No longer are you trusting in what Aristotle told you. Instead, you are pursuing knowledge through your own senses. What do they show you? What do they prove to you? Consider even any debate you have today. When you fight with a friend and, or get into an argument with a friend over, goodness, everything from politics to whose sports team is better, it's likely that at some point you say, well, show me the evidence. Show me your facts. Show me what's true. Whether or not you realize that, that is actually an example of that empiricist mindset. You want to observe something in order to prove its veracity, to prove it's true. Additionally, Bacon is also important in terms of saying what science's purpose was. He was a real champion of saying that science was designed and should be about supporting and developing mankind. That science should serve a public purpose as much as something that benefits scientists off in a lab or off making observations. Another major figure showing the differing ways in which people started to view the world is René Descartes. Now, if Francis Bacon championed an inductive way of reasoning, namely start with a hypothesis, use observations, and therefore end up at a conclusion, René Descartes championed the opposite, a deductive system of reasoning. Deductive reasoning begins with a general principle and derives particular information from it. The most famous example of this is Descartes trying to figure out what could he believe is true. What was the foundational element of true? What could he put his trust in? And he famously comes to the conclusion that I think, therefore I am. And for him, that's the basis of all knowledge. Now, this focus on thought, this almost deep, abiding rationalism or skepticism, would lead him to champion a view of almost a mechanistic worldview, where the physical realm was separate from the realm of thought. So he sort of divided the world in that regard. But in many ways, both of these figures are critically important. If Bacon gave us our modern way of thinking about scientific knowledge and how we acquire it, Descartes did the same for creating our modern views of rationalism. And so here you see some of the points that we've been talking about. Both of these figures, René Descartes and Sir Francis Bacon, are critical in establishing not only some developments in the realm of science, but also underscoring how scientific thinking started to influence how we saw ourselves and how we saw the world. Again, inductive reasoning, empiricism, that's the basis of the scientific method. The deductive reasoning of Descartes forms the basis of much of modern rationalism. Today, it would seem foreign to us to argue in any other way. None of us would get in an argument about politics and say, well, you see, I'm right because Plato agrees with me. None of us would think that would be a basis of knowledge. None of us would think that a firm argument for politics would be, but you see, the Bible tells me. And the fact that we don't argue that way anymore just showcases how much the scientific revolution was starting to transform life. How these figures, Sir Francis Bacon and René Descartes, started to shift the manner in which we acquired knowledge and how we think about knowledge, and thus how science was starting to change perceptions of man and his society.